Okay. Hello, everyone. In the name of God, the most benevolent and the most merciful, in honor of the original unconditional moment that all conditional moments have arisen from and will return to. In honor of the world host and the system admin beyond the world room. Today's lecture is a very interesting one, and the intention is to make ourselves aware of various perspectives. In the same way that you can look at an object, you can hold an object in your hand and look at it from different angles, we can look at subjects from different angles. We can wonder about the relationship of a concept with a context and what is the implication, you know? And when you look at the human experience, we are explorers at heart. And when we stop exploring, we start looping in fixed realities that don't satisfy. There are various views. I will share my views, but I have provided a research component so we look at this from more than just my views. And the research component again is there to provide different angles, because in my experience so far in this lifetime, there is way more unknown than known. And the fact that we human beings are fascinated by knowledge rather than the unknown where that knowledge is found is something that I guess we can blame our conditioning. So it is not that I am telling you open your mind or close or keep your mind closed or whatnot. I am a member of the human species. There's 8.1 billion humans currently alive. In an estimate from 300,000 years ago is 117 billion human beings that have ever existed. Okay, the purpose of the human experience, just like a garden, is not that all the flowers become the same and that's when they feel they're correct. It is the fact that we can coexist with various different views and constantly upgrading the soil that the future generations are raised in. I find it to be very, very key that we wonder beyond our satisfaction sometimes, more than an emotional reasoning to maintain reality in a certain way. We must have the capacity to perceive beyond our emotions. Sorry guys, just give me a second. So actually I'll get into it. The fascinating thing about this lecture is that it has a humorous angle to it. And it's a humorous angle that we have all avoided and ignored, and it must now be confronted. We must acknowledge what's actually going on, or we have in some sense been lost in our inner realms. The task of the human species is to find clarity against all odds. And so we have had great warriors in history. They have in some sense been fearless in the outer realms. And so I am noticing that my species My great species is in some sense falling into the fear of not questioning how people before them in some sense explained reality. And so in my sci-fi I've written it, but in the future the whole world will be divided between knownists and unknownists, which means what do you consider the causal position of reality? The causal state. Pretty much the relationship between the unconditional and the conditional. This is very key. So, to start with the title, why do I say the irony of the concept of physicalism? Because the idea of physicality is not physical. That's the explanation of the title. But the question is far deeper. What is physicality? And we human beings have to realize that in front of our eyes, we find ourselves in a public, physical, outer realm server. And behind our eyes, we find ourselves in an inner realm, subjective, private server. This whole time, every human being has been living a life behind their eyes. And how can we explain this? Is because you decide before you act. What are you deciding? What are you accessing? What is fascinating is that they conditioned and convinced us when your eyes are closed, you cannot see. But you can close your eyes and remember the food you ate yesterday. You can see it. And light is not entering your eyes. This suggests an inner space. Now, what is viewing that inner space leads to the mystery of metaphysics. But before that, we're going to look in the sense of, think of it this way. I am talking about the past, and I share my views on the present, and then the future. What is going on in the present, and what may happen in the future in accordance to the designs we have access and the probabilities these designs can lead to. So, we're going to get into it. This is the research component. I'm going to start with the research component. Pretty much, I told ChatGPT 5.2 the irony of the concept of physicalism. What do you see? How do you perceive it, right? And this is ChatGPT 5.2. I don't have access to the most advanced AI and research, but the point of it is not to believe what we say, is to realize that what we hear is a form. And behind our eyes, our life, the vitality of our awareness, the presence of our awareness is the context. In other words, you are the organizing agent that is invisibly organizing or deciding or choosing to identify with the more than one thoughts that you perceive behind your eyes before you act on them. You can say even that when a person is sitting, moves to a point where the person sees they've already opened the fridge door, they're already pouring the glass of orange juice or whatever, or eating whatever food, right? And so what does this mean? That means we human beings have been misindoctrinated. We have been, the way they have taught us how reality is, strategically is no longer efficient. And when you look at, for example, in psychology, concepts of emotional intrusion, emotional enmeshment, or even self-sabotage. These are all about how a past response and strategy that worked at some point in your past is still being implemented now, but it is not relevant now. Do you know? And we must consider that the human position is an outdated ancient biological technology that now is living in a sort of modern, humanized, unnatural environment. And part of the tools we use for that unnatural environment was how we extended into the unnatural early on in our evolution. as beings. What does this mean? I want you to imagine, before I get into the research component, guys, I'm following my rhythm here. Imagine in the future, human beings are going to become cyborgs. Cyborg is a term in sci-fi which means half human, half robot. Okay? That means if human chips in their brains, or if their body parts start replacing for robotic, let's say advanced technology body parts, in some sense that human being is not 100% to this cyborg. Okay, but it was very different. It was how human being entity, but this natural objective entity became, in some sense, at some point, identified as a subjective self. It became an idea to itself. So, which means in today's world, you're not seeing 100% natural biological human beings. You are physically, but psychologically, we are no longer purely natural biological beings, because there is something going on within the experience of the human being that has to do with the referencing of meaning in accordance to the memory trail of the entity. That means when you can remember the past doesn't exist, and engaged with an abstraction. The greatest result, I think the greatest reasoning for human consciousness, the phenomena of memory, is presenting it to some degree. But there is a deeper view. I personally am an unknownist, which means that I find what is experiencing this think of it this way: the true presence of the being is the local present, the local physical position of the being is being administered in a non-local field. Because when I went in pursuit of the question, of where do ideas come, the answer is they come from your access to them. They are already there. Intelligence has already lived. I don't know how to explain it to you. It's like we are a post-life phenomena thinking we are the actual life phenomena. Okay? In other words, it's all happened before, but not here, not from here. Anyways, we will dive into the research component. The irony of physicalism, an advanced view, ChatGPT 5.2, I am reading this. And also I will listen to these lectures, and I would like to hear these as well. Academic view. Physicalism, as articulated in contemporary philosophy, is the metaphysical thesis that all that exists, either physical or fully dependent on, I'll read that again. Physicalism, as articulated in contemporary philosophy, is the metaphysical thesis that all that exists is either physical or fully dependent on the physical. Historically grounded in the success of the natural sciences, it inherits a methodological commitment to explanation through quantification, causal closure, and structural description. This commitment traces back to early modern science, where the distinction between primary and secondary qualities redefined reality in terms of what could be mathematically represented, relegating qualitative experience to the subjective domain. While this abstraction enabled unprecedented predictive power, it simultaneously excluded consciousness from the very ontology it sought to describe. The central irony of physicalism lies in its explanatory ambition. Physical explanations account for structure, function, and causal relations. Yet conscious experience presents itself as irreducibly first person, qualitative, and immediately given. Attempts to reduce or eliminate consciousness in favor of neural or functional descriptions risk undermining the epistemic foundations of scientific inquiry itself. Since observation, reasoning, and justification presuppose experiential awareness. Moreover, physicalism faces a self-referential tension. If all beliefs are fully explicable in causal physical terms, then the belief in physicalism is held not because it is true, but because it is physically caused. So this is a very interesting point. I'll read that again. So it says, moreover, physicalism faces a self-referential tension. If all beliefs are fully explicable in causal physical terms, then the belief in physics is held not because it is true, but because it is physically caused. This reframes rational justification as a byproduct of causation rather than a norm-governed process. Thus, academic physicalism, while coherent as a research program, remains philosophically ironic in that it depends upon phenomena, experience, meaning, and rationality that it cannot fully account for without circulatory or conceptual loss. That means, if I was to, in a sort of, I guess the way I understand this to explain it, it's pretty much saying, okay, if we start off considering that everything, okay, can be explained through physical terms, then the belief that something is physical should also be able to be explained through physical causation, okay? In the sense that here it says, physicalism, while coherent as a research program, remains philosophically ironic in that it depends on phenomena that it cannot fully account for without circulatory or conceptual loss. In other words, the explanation, so think of it this way, people are saying, yo guys, we're only the physicalists, the fundamentalists, the physical fundamentalists, okay, they're pretty much saying everything can be explained through physicality, but the human, it's pretty much they're saying everything is physical, but we cannot explain, but the way we're experiencing it, we cannot explain consciousness just purely through physicality. That means the experience, the human experience, is different than the conclusion that it's all physically caused. That means we cannot use physicalism to explain everything. Okay? Now we go to the advanced view. From the most advanced philosophical and civilizational perspective, physicalism appears less as an ultimate description of reality and more as a transitional ontology, an adaptive framework suited to an era focused on control, prediction, and technological expansion. It succeeds precisely because it compresses reality into stable, manipulable regularities, allowing humanity to engineer complex systems without resolving deeper ontological questions. However, as scientific inquiry advances, the concept of, in quotations, the physical itself becomes increasingly abstract, relational, and observer dependent, dissolving the classical notion of matter that physicalism originally presupposed. In this advanced view, the physical is not fundamental but emergent, a consistent interface arising from deeper informational, relational, or process-based structures. Consciousness is not an anomaly to be explained away, but a primary datum indicating that reality cannot be exhaustively described from a third-person perspective alone. Intentionality and experience are represented not as epiphenomena, but as integral dimensions of an intelligible universe. The ultimate irony of physicalism, then, is that its greatest achievement, systemic explanation, reveals its own limits. It explains how reality behaves while remaining silent on why reality is presentable, experienceable, or intelligible at full. In this sense, physicalism may be historically indispensable, yet ontologically incomplete, serving as a necessary phase in humanity's progression toward more integrative frameworks that unify structure and experience rather than sacrificing one for the other. Do you know? Now I've asked AI to share like the most current debates, just views on this. The debate over whether reality is fundamentally physical persists because it arises from a genuine explanatory tension rather than from ignorance or ideological disagreement. On one hand, the natural sciences have achieved extraordinary success by modeling reality in physical terms, revealing stable laws, causal closure, and deep correlation between brain activity and conscious states. From this perspective, physicalism appears compelling. Every observed change in experience corresponds to changes in the physical substrate. Not violations of physical causal. No violations of physical causation are detected. And evolutionary continuity suggests that mind emerges from matter rather than existing independently of it. These contradictions, or at least exhaustively describe physical terms. On the other hand, this explanatory success encounters a principled limit when confronted with consciousness itself. Physical explanations account for structure, function, and behavior. Yet subjective experience is defined by its first-person qualitative and immediately given character, which does not logically follow from even a complete person physical description. This gap is not merely empirical, but conceptual. One can coherently conceive of all physical processes occurring without experience occurring at all, indicating that identity between the physical and the experiential is not entailed by physical facts alone. Philosophy therefore maintains the debate by examining what science presupposes but cannot resolve, namely the ontological status of experience, meaning, and rational justification. If all beliefs are purely physical events caused by prior states, then beliefs are caused rather than justified, undermining the normative structure upon which scientific reasoning itself depends. For this reason, most scientists today implicitly adopt methodological physicalism, treating all phenomena as physically explainable for the purposes of research without committing to stronger metaphysical claim that reality is nothing but. So that means they're saying that we can physically explain phenomena, but they're not saying that it's purely physical. Modern scientists have this view. It says, correspondingly, contemporary philosophy has moved away from strict reductionism toward more plural or integrative frameworks that acknowledge the reality of physical structure while questioning whether, in quotations, the physical is ontologically fundamental. As a species, humanity now occupies a transitional stage. Technologically powerful, empirically sophisticated, yet conceptually incomplete. We can model and manipulate reality with unprecedented precision, but we lack a unified ontology that fully integrates objective structure with subjective experience. The persistence of this debate is therefore not a failure of knowledge, but a sign of the boundary, where its most successful explanatory framework encounters its own limits. So it's very interesting. So I'm going to read this. It says, why there is a debate about whether reality is physical at all. At the deepest level, this debate exists because two things we know with absolute certainty appear to belong to different explanatory categories. The world has structure, regularity, and causal behavior. And two, there is subjective experience occurring at all. Science excels at the first, consciousness defines the second. The tension is not emotional or ideological, it is structural. The debate persists because no existing framework fully unifies these two facts without remainder. It says why science itself does not settle the question. Science, by definition, studies measurable, publicly observable, third-person phenomena. This is not a limitation, it is a strength. However, this methodological commitment creates a boundary. Science can tell us how phenomena behave, but not what it is like for phenomena to be experienced. So, you know what this means, guys? It is not wrong when we say, like, yo, man, there's a physical relationship, like there's physical laws here, if I throw this like tomato at a wall, the wall is going to show stress, and that stress is going to make the tomato. Do you know what I mean? It's not the physical explanation. See, the issue is, it's like it says it can explain. I guess I'll just say it as it says it here. Science can tell us how phenomena behave, but not what it is like for phenomena to be experienced. In other words, science can tell you that when you love one, like there is something happening in your brain, or when you're excited, there's dopamine, but it cannot, only using physicalism, explain the experience of physicalism, which is not physical in itself. Okay, so in other words, to clarify this, it's like saying that I can use physicalism to explain, like I can explain how my body works. I cannot explain how I'm experiencing my body works or how that experience is. Do you know? That means, to me, let me tell you why personally I feel there's an issue. If you go look at the dictionary, so let's say you're looking at the dictionary, okay? When you go read the definition of a word, it is using the definition of other words to explain the definition of this word. So in other words, they're dependent to one another. It's circular. Do you know? In the way how would I explain it to you that when I dream, like actually dream in deep sleep and REMs, let's say I've gone into deep sleep and I'm dreaming, I have had dreams that I have had physical sensations in. Okay? Consider this, folks. I have had a dream that I physically moved things. I've ran underwater in a dream, floating in the room. And so, and I'm super physical, man, but it was not physically happening. And so what is fascinating is that if we consider the mystery of dreams, of our dreams, the hidden wisdom, as Attar of Nishapur, this poet from like 900 years ago, he said, like, people were talking about reality and he's like, buddy, look at your dreams, look at the hidden mysteries behind them. Do you understand? And the hidden mystery behind us is that the experience of physicalism isn't physical necessarily. And so what does this mean? This goes back to, I finished the research component, guys, by the way, and now if I can get and experience physicality in a dream state, and I'm experiencing physicality right in front of my eyes in the conscious waking state, how do I know it is not a dream state? How do I know what the difference between physically touching something in my dream and experiencing the consequence of it, do you know, the sensation of it, do you know, and me physically in the conscious waking state experiencing it? And so, what does this imply? This implies that there is an issue with the context. If the concept, we're stuck on a conceptual level, you need to begin your contextual search. Do you know what that means? That means if you're looking at life as a specific sense of self or a sort of perspective, okay, and that perspective limits the progress, you have to start wondering about how did this perspective that I am now limited in arise? You see, human beings are conditioned to treat reality as a noun. Okay, but think about it, folks. This whole time, you have been identifying as this specific person, as a specific being in this world. Isn't it a changing world? Isn't it dynamic? And so what is the context to a verb? That means if the context to a noun is a physical world, if you were right now, context to that verb be, well, the answer is it is a field of force. To be a physical entity in this moment is a privilege. It is a conditional display. But how the conditional display is there, this even goes far deeper. Because how do we explain an instantaneous awareness referentially? And if you experience physicalism in a dream state and experience physicalism in the conscious waking state, then physicalism is the ignorance. Then perhaps physicalism is not physicalism. Now, what is the human experience? I pointed at this at the beginning. I will go deeper into it. At some point, I noticed that meaning is not external. That means it was there from the beginning. It was so obvious. Imagine the Louvre in Paris, this art gallery. Imagine the Mona Lisa painting. Imagine two people looking at that Mona Lisa painting. They are both in front of their eyes seeing the same physical painting. Okay? But the meaning they give to that painting is different. One of them thinks she's smiling, the other thinks she's pissed off. Do you know what I mean? So you must understand that meaning is an external event. The forms that we give meaning to have arisen from external events. So what does this mean? Every person is starting in their inner realms. You're starting in your own world. And this is the difference between the ignorance of a conscious entity. It's the ignorance of a conscious entity is not that it's just unconscious of certain things. It's that it may limit its consciousness. So, when we see a human being, is it fair to say that they have no meaning? That means the physicalism is legit, like how we have concept, context, self and world. Of the experience of existence is not physical, but the context of the existence of experience is. In my experience, as life has gone forth, after 12,500 days, the way we know what's going on, if we believe the way we know things, we eclipse what is actually there. And when I was young, I was under the impression, inspired by ideas of kings, stories of Shahnameh, the Persian Book of Kings, this next level work of literature known world over by Abul Qasim Ferdowsi. It is not about the inner realm controlling the outer realms. You see, logically, the way the brain works, it's comfortable with familiar patterns, and it repeats them. Do you know? But that is bias. That is a sort of bias. That means our intelligence, for the sake of its emotional preservation, limits its perspective on reality to be able to manage it. But reality is beyond. It is beyond how human being has a different DNA. Every human being has a different perspective. We are in similar circumstances, but the experience of those circumstances are not the same. Welcome, guys. Somebody in the chat section says observations of reality are subjective. Yes. Like looking at clouds. Yeah, like if you see a face in the cloud, that's subjective. But the cloud is not subjective. But experientially, you can't tell if it's not subjective. Because you need the experiencer to be in the room. In the same way Friedrich Nietzsche said, if a tree falls in an empty forest, did it fall? If there is no awareness to the physicalism, was there physicalism? Is the question. When we go into deep sleep, do we experience ourselves as physical beings, or is it just absent? And when we're in a dream state again, that's complete proof that you can experience, have an experience of physicality, but it is not physical in the sense of, in the same intensity as the outer realms. Okay, so think of it this way: the perspective I'm sharing is kind of like a thesis, an antithesis, and a synthesis to it. Think of the thesis being like we're physical beings, okay? We're a non-fictional, physical, and objective entity. Think of that being the thesis, a non-physical, objective entity. Think of the antithesis being like, no, we're also a fictional, subjective entity. Do you know? Non-physical entity. A fictional, subjective, non-physical entity. That's the antithesis. What is the synthesis? We are an unknown being. Guys, when I was giving this episode, I was on the fringe of wanting, at first titling that I for the first time in my life healed myself yesterday in a way that shocked me. And I am telling you folks, the most advanced function are not by limiting yourself to a specific form in a specific found within a specific format. The solution, I am telling you, I'm a random. I know. I'm not. I'm not that popular. My channel doesn't have that range of an exposure yet. Do you know? See, it's like what I'm explaining is that reality comes across as a double-edged sword, but when you realize the hand that holds the sword is not the sword, then the game changes. Okay? Or I could have used the term double-sided coin. You know? From one side of the coin, the causation is the experience. From the other side of the coin, the causation is existential. It is all about the choice. That's why I'm saying I'm an unknownist, because it is very clear to me that my awareness to my physical experience of existence isn't physical. That means when somebody comes and says, I'm happy, like they come and tell me they're happy or they're sad or they're angry or whatever, I cannot be like, yo man, anger is physical. What is that? The experience of anger is not, how can we say it's physical? How can we say consciousness is physical when it's an awareness to the physical? That means if you were purely physical, you should not be able to notice the physical. In the same, how would I say it? If all reality, think of physicalism as a box, okay? But you're noticing the box. You're not in the box. And this leads to the perspectives that many philosophers throughout the centuries have discussed, that is what's actually going on local or non-local. That means, think of when I was a kid, one of my first toys my parents bought was a remote control car. Okay? And what fascinated me was, in some sense, I didn't have the understanding then of waves and whatnot, but what fascinated me was that in some sense I could move that without being in the car, without being like in the remote control car. Obviously, you can't because you're bigger than it. But I'm saying, like, in my perspective, it occurred to me that it was remotely being conducted. Now, this question is when you come to this view, you realize, like, how do I say it? If you were right now, I'll make a political reference to it because I'm from Iran. For example, the country Iran has had a 2,500-year-old empire-oriented monarchy, okay? But for the last 47, 48 years, it has turned into a republic, an Islamic republic, okay? And it's like, and I was born in 1991 during it being an Islamic republic, okay? And it's like suddenly realizing that in ancient cultures, they had a more sophisticated analysis of the human experience rather than reducing it to just physicalism because of its explanatory power. You see, human beings are beings that cannot communicate all of themselves. When I communicate something to viewers, it is not my total experience. It's impossible to just give you my experience because then we will need to go and do things. If somebody had gone skydiving instantaneously just by like words, I wouldn't need to go skydiving. There would just need to be one human that experienced everything and everybody would have access to the experience, right? But it is not the case. The depth of this even goes far superior because what the secular perspective and what the physicalist and the scientific method does not acknowledge is that the observation is, how do I say it? It's like a verb. It's like a noun is experiencing a verb and it cannot explain that verb with nouns. Or a noun is experiencing itself as a verb and being like, how am I just a noun? Do you know? I think that's a good way of saying it. Somebody in the chat section says, I've heard of people taking psychedelics with each other and seeing the same thing. See, like you don't even need to take psychedelics. Those two people in the Louvre looking at the Mona Lisa, they are seeing the same form, okay? They're seeing the same form, right? Or think of it this way. Imagine my name is Amin, okay? A-M-I-N. There's many people on the planet named Amin. If I come and say I am Amin, what separates me from somebody else who says I am Amin? Okay? It is the experience that differentiates it. Okay? So, but overall, the biggest realization I have had in this life, which I shared yesterday, one of the most important lectures, the one with the snow smiley face, you know. If you're a fan of these lectures, go listen to that. The secret to even healing is in that lecture. I had a sore throat yesterday for like, it just appeared for like some throat issue. It appeared. And I got upset and I'm like, man, should I go get medicine or something? And then I realized I constantly brought myself back to my realization, the depth of my realization that I'm an unknown being experiencing an unknown moment. The moment I released that self that had that idea of myself that had the sore throat went away. I got shocked. A majority of physical illnesses or even physical illnesses are because of thoughts that don't need to be in the presence of your inner realms. Somebody in the chat section says, so our personal experiences that shape our inner world dictate what we perceive or affect our reality. Think of it this way. You're living in, I am saying that your body, imagine, has ears. Imagine your body is a different being. This is going to sound weird, but just entertain me here. Imagine you are not your body. Imagine your body is a being. Just like imagine if somebody comes into your moment Do you know, some like you meet someone, they are existing in your moment, but they're not you. Now I'm saying, imagine for a moment you are not your body, the mind of its own that you don't know. Okay? Time, what you perceive in your, that means your body hears you from the inside. Do you know? Even though it performs in the outside. What I realized is that in a changing, edgeless world, to conditionalize, to limit the framework of our being. So think of it this way. Think of it this way, that you are not your body. You are the awareness that accesses forms. This specific form that you can move, and you can't move everything. This is a part of the simple problem and the problem of consciousness. That why is it that I can use my consciousness to move my body, do you know? But why is it that I can't move like crouching dragon at the end? Like, why can't I redirect my organs or be aware of every single thing in my body and conceptualize that? Because that would lead to insanity. If I had the experience of direct experience of every cell in my body, the amount of conceptual formations would overload the brain processing power. And keep in mind, the brain, I'm not saying the brain is a machine. We can see it as a mechanism. I'm not saying we don't have brains just because the meaning is fictional. You know, I am saying that the meaning we give to the brain, that means it is way more accurate to treat it as we are an unknown being and everything is unknown, and knowledge is are simulations that can redirect. So your true presence is unknown. I have shared this point, made this point from a different angle even, that I said, if you look at human history, in an unknown world, an unknown place, an unknown self emerged, unconscious to itself. The moment it became conscious, it is a self, a format of a self. It became a known self. It simulated itself as a known self. It became real, that I am not just some unknown occurrence. I am a sort of contained intelligence. Okay? The known self. So unknown world, there arose an unknown self. Unknown self noticed itself, it became a known self. That known self has more of a non-physical, subjective position than an objective position. So think of it this way. In an unknown objective world, there arose an unknown objective self. That unknown objective self, this is still a mystery, found the capability to be a known subjective self. And now the known subjective self is subjectifying position, in my view. And I will tell you, it is liberating. You have been conditioned your whole life to loop as ideas bound to even different conditions. When you look at the conditions of life, you cannot ignore the human will, and it's the world we're living in currently. We must be very alert, because free will wants to feel safe at the cost of the limitation of reality, at the cost of limiting reality. The true presence of what's going on is unknown. In other words, for me, it is more real that I'm an unknown life force that is experiencing an unknown moment. Everything else I conditionalize is based on one another, in the same way the words in the dictionary are defined by one another. In other words, an unknown presence, an unknown force is having a relationship with an unknown moment. The byproduct of that is knowledge. I am telling you, for how long are you going to believe you are a subject? Do you know, like, oh human beings, they haven't told you. Oh members of my species, they haven't informed you. You're not in this world to just live a known life. And I hope for all of you, you get to experience your unknown lives on earth. Consciously. That's the game of current of now. That means I'll say it again, at the beginning, an unconscious, unknown world. Then an unconscious, unknown self. Then a conscious, unknown self. But that consciousness uses language to nullify itself. Somebody in the chat section says, now I just have to separate the nonsense from what matters. I feel I have to relearn a lot and reprogram myself, or let God do it. See, what I'm telling you, first of all, thanks for engaging the chat. What I would respond to that, okay, is that it's not about the idea of you that needs to learn. It is arising from the meaning within. Okay? It's arising from within. So you can extend your curriculum or shorten it. It's up to your choice. But when I say unknown, at the beginning, I acknowledge the system admin. What does this mean? This is going to make it a bit heavy, but through the theological lens, what we are made aware of is that the original state of reality was the presence of an absolute being. Now, we cannot understand what that means from here. But an absolute being, the way I can put it into words, is like not being that the conditions define it. It defines the conditions. The conditions adjust to it. Not we adjust to the conditions of our survival. Do you see? And that power is unconditional. When you realize truth is unconditional, then you must ask yourself, what condition can enable you to realize the unconditional? It's not possible. So the way I can say the system admin intended, at least because I believe in a system admin beyond the world room. Nothing in the room, nothing in the box can define what is outside of the box for me. What is outside of the box is beyond the box. Okay? So if some being in the box wants to connect or have a relationship with God outside of the box, perhaps it can be as simple as realizing the moment you are not the idea of yourself, the nafs, the ego, what is present in the room? We are not, and in no way I am trying to tell people, don't think what I'm saying is that we all are God. No. Just when I say truth is unconditional, it doesn't mean all the conditions equal the unconditional. The conditions are in the presence of the unconditional. So think of it this way. The higher order processes of this world, the higher planes, you are less known because the world is known. But here, in these lower order processes we experience, the world is known, you are unknown. I don't know how else to say it. Okay, it is. Think the best way I found, I guess, to say it is that in the same moment that you consider you're a known being, you're simultaneously being an unknown being. In the same moment you're considering a known earth, there is an unknown world. In the same moment you're considering a known world, there's an unknown. There's the presence of an unknown world. The unknown is on a presence level. And I am saying that your unknown life begins when the idea of you doesn't own an unknown moment anymore. You free yourself from the idea of you. You free your biological body that is enslaved to the subjective idea of you. That's how healing occurs. Free yourself from the ideas that were too small and were just aspects of your presence, aspects of your moment. That means the human is conditioned to want to identify. Okay, if I'm not an object, what am I? Okay, I'm a subject. If I'm not a subject, what am I? I'm like some spiritual power. If I'm not a spiritual power, what am I? Eventually you will realize the unknown was in the room first. And if the original was in the room first, human beings are actually having a relationship with the unknown as an unknown self that is accounted for as an experience, religious experience. Because it doesn't matter who you are, I'm Muslim, but from the Islamic perspective, God is not humanizable. It is not, I cannot conditionalize it. Therefore, when a Muslim prays, what are they praying to? They are praying to an unconditional moment of being. And I want to even take this further. Imagine what sort of being could be aware of all conditions in existence. It can't be a condition, because then it wouldn't be aware of all conditions in existence. That means the original power of this world is unconditional, and it is the unknown. And folks, if you realize your unknown life, if you realize this whole time you have not been talking to people, experiencing the world, you have been an unknown force interacting with the presence of an unknown moment. This will revolutionize your life. Not only will you start healing, you will start seeing the original earth. We are simulated beings. My body is simulated here for some time. My ability to communicate, as the person, because like if I become 90 years old, I'm not going to be talking as much, these are conditions. And what seems to be, when they say religion said faith, it's as if, you are this unconditional force that has an ability to shift the condition from its condition. In other words, physicalism believes you're a condition inside a condition. Those who see beyond this masquerade, the unknown life is your unconditional relationship with think of it this way, an unconditional self's relationship with its unconditional world. The maturity of what we truly are as beings surpasses our explanatory powers. And they have reduced the belief in what reality is to only its explanatory power, its explanation, not its actuality. So be careful, folks. You're in a world that explanations are eclipsing realities. Do you know? And the actual answer is that it surpasses the explanation. So what does that mean? Explanations are known. Somebody in the chat section says, welcome guys. Somebody in the chat section says, you are infinity experiencing itself as infinite. The mind is strong enough to take our infinite power into a finite creation. Also 3D density, I think you're saying. 3D dense. Somebody in the chat section says, I'm getting out of being unknown to be known by knowing the knowing. Okay, I'm the way I have access experientially is that if I start off instantaneously, if my consciousness is instantaneously present, then in some sense I cannot refer, there is no reference that can explain it. You know, you need like at least 2 moments to be able to explain those moments, right? But how can you explain one moment from just one moment? How can a photograph explain it itself? It's just is or how do I say it? A photograph can't use itself to explain itself. Think of it this way. And of course, guys, we're different beings, different paths. You know, I'm just doing what our ancestors would, where like back in the day there were tribes and the person would go and like, I don't know, hunt or gather or find something the tribe hadn't found and bring it back to the tribe. But now what we bring back to the tribe is the depth of our honest experiences of reality, so the whole species sooner can get to its original information. Think of it this way. The more people are intentionally honest, the more the information that's moving, the information age is inaccurate, and there will be children born and they would treat the information they find, the original information, accurate. Somebody in the chat section says, someone said the other day they were the universe sensing itself with all 6 senses. Guys, that's, you're still not understand, you're not still understanding what I'm saying. I'm saying the presence is unconditional. That means it's not explainable. In the it just the final, I don't know, as far as it's like where it hits the sea, okay, is the realization of an unknown being. Do you know what it means that you're an unknown being? That means all the ideas you have had on yourself are not you. They were strategies. They were tactics. They were tactics. In the chat section, guys, when you say someone also said the universe is a mind. Guys, that is Vedic thought. You got to go check out how the yogis perceive reality. You know, the yogis perceive reality in the sense that we are all the thoughts of God, and even gods are the thoughts of a greater God. You know. So, anyways, folks. We looked into this now. I've explained the irony of the concept of physicalism in the sense that our experience, our subjective experience, cannot be reduced to our objectivism because our objectivism doesn't explain it, can't explain it. So it could be something in, somebody talked about dimensions in the chat. It could be like, imagine physicalism is 2D, okay? The mind is 3D, the soul is 4D. You know, you can't use the 2D to explain the 3D. You can use the 2D to explain the 3D, but the 2D doesn't have the experience of the 3D. The 3D doesn't have the experience of the 4D. If you are actually the 4D, do you know, how can you just identify as the 2D or the 3D? Do you know, that means if you are the presence of your whole moment, unknown, because all the things you use to know your moment are found within your moment. The awareness is different than consciousness. Consciousness is awareness zoomed in on a condition. Okay, but awareness can't be defined by the conditions because the conditions are found within the awareness itself. And so, I don't know, guys. I'm just trying to say I experienced a next level liberation. Okay? And passion has become not something of a chronic nature anymore. It just comes and goes. It's as if before I get angry at people, it's clear to me that I don't know who they are. They don't know who I am. None of us know where we are, And it's like I am released by my mind trying to formalize everything. No, guys, I totally appreciate your feedback. I don't think I'm judging you guys in any way because I don't have your inner experiences to reach a synthesis, you know? And we need to have the openness. Like I was having it was like a comments on one of my videos. I was having a conversation with someone, right? And the person, instead of talking about like keeping it on a conceptual level, limits it to a personal thing. That means I'm talking about like the nature of consciousness being non-local, and then the person says you're saying woo-woo. That means I'm talking about something that's impersonal. do you know and then they suddenly personalize it, and then like at that point I was like, all right, man, this conversation ended. The moment it became personal, right? And guys, I have a lot of blind spots. It's just that my relationship with my own manifestation has changed. That means the presence of God is beyond the conditions of manifestation. Therefore, if the presence of God is beyond the conditions of manifestation, the condition can't explain God. Okay, right? Excuse me, can't. I am just saying we cannot reduce an original unconditional moment, an original conditional cause, to a simulated conditional effect. I have liberated my presence from the idea of me owning me all the time. And yesterday I liberated my body from the idea of me owning me all the time. Not in the sense of not having a synchronization between the inner realms and outer realms. I'm just saying, when you realize you were never any of the ideas you had, you will be fascinated. To me, the fascination of the unknown is the greatest. It's like it's the most exciting thing. There's nothing in this world is cooler than that to me. That means, what is more cooler, what we already know or what we don't know? Exactly. Somebody in the chat section said, I'm returning to childlike mind. Yes. That fascination, you find it is a great blessing. It's a victory. But it's not, I am telling you, it's not, I don't know. I just realized, we're all allowing the ideas of ourselves to own us, and yet the idea is just a part of our moment, the ideas that come and go. And so, in honor of the presence of the unknown, may all be fascinated by this unknown world. Thank you for listening. In the name of God, the most benevolent and the most merciful and the most advanced, in honor of the original moment, original unconditional moment that all conditions have arisen from and will return to. We were free before the idea of freedom needed to be assigned to an idea. Have a great day, guys. Thank you for listening.